Chapter 40. The Fishers of Men. Early morning. Large and small fishing boats are scattered across the Sea of Galilee. Men at their stations do their best to catch fish. The wind blowing across the Sea of Galilee cools the sweat of the fishermen. As it moves over the surface, the lake forms small waves. It is because of these winds and waves that the Sea of Galilee, though technically a lake, is called a sea. The Jordan River is a strong river that flows through a long valley flanked by mountains. While the river itself ends at the Dead Sea, the valley continues southward, stretching all the way to the Red Sea. This area lies mostly below sea level, forming a basin. Because of this, winds from both mountain ranges often meet over the lake, sometimes creating sudden, fierce gusts. When such winds blow, all boats must be pulled ashore. Otherwise, 9 out of 10 will capsize and sink. Travelers coming by the way of the sea, or from Tyre and Sidon who have seen the vast Mediterranean, might scoff at the Sea of Galilee's size, saying, "What kind of sea is this?" But after experiencing its storms, their opinion changes. It truly is a sea. The Sea of Galilee is known by various names. It is called the Sea of Tiberias, after the nearby city, or Kinneret or Gennesaret, because its shape resembles a traditional instrument. The lake's circumference is about 32 miles, so it's common to cross by boat rather than walk around. The largest city around the lake is Tiberias, located on the western shore. It was built by Herod Antipas, named after the Roman Emperor Tiberius, and served as the capital of his tetrarchy. Originally a burial ground, Jews were reluctant to enter the city. At first, Jews refused to move there, so Antipas forcibly relocated people within his territory to populate it. He also enacted policies allowing slaves and others without freedom to become free men if they settled in the city, encouraging them to stay. Many foreigners also settled there because Antipas provided free land and built good houses for them. North of Tiberias lies Magdala, followed by Gennesaret and Capernaum. Capernaum was a border city with Herod Philip's tetrarchy and had the largest synagogue in Galilee, along with the customs office, and was large enough to have Roman troops stationed there. As Peter rested on his boat, he gazed into the distance at his hometown of Bethsaida, lost in thought. After I got married, I decided to settle in Capernaum, where my mother-in-law was already living. Many people from my village, including my brother Andrew, also moved here. I suppose it was because Bethsaida, the quiet town of my childhood, had grown into a bustling city full of foreigners. Tetrarch Philip had developed it, renaming it Bethsaida Julius after Augustus's daughter Julia, and turned it into a city. Still, it's not as if moving here meant going far. It's just a short trip to the neighboring town, so if I had to give a reason, that would be it. But really, does it matter whether the fish comes from Bethsaida or Capernaum? After all, they're both from the same Sea of Galilee. After spending a long time working in Galilee, I often become desensitized to the beauty of this sea. Yet sometimes, especially at dawn or dusk, I find myself lost in thought, gazing at the sea's breathtaking colors. I simply stand there, mesmerized, saying, "Ha, it's beautiful." My brother Andrew, however, is more composed and thoughtful. He sometimes shares profound insights. Once, after visiting the Dead Sea, he said, "Peter, if the Dead Sea didn't exist, wouldn't the Sea of Galilee have become like it? Even with fresh water flowing in, a body of water without an outlet is a dead sea. It only receives and never gives." This simple truth is taught by Galilee and the Dead Sea, isn't it? No life can thrive in a place that only receives and never gives. After hearing Andrew's words, I began to think about it, And indeed, Galilee, the Jordan River, and the Dead Sea seem to mirror human life. The water of life flows from Mount Hermon, giving Galilee the character of a living being, then flows on as the Jordan River, winding its way until it meets its end in the Dead Sea. If I think of it this way, Capernaum, where I now live, becomes a place that shapes character. The baptism I administered by the Jordan River could be seen as proclaiming God's kingdom to those living in the space between life and death. Maybe I'm overthinking it. After all, Jesus is destined to be a king, so perhaps it's not right to compare these things to human life. Peter, what are you thinking about? I was wondering when Jesus would come. Yes, I wish he would come soon. If Jesus comes, we'll have to leave again, won't we? I suppose so. This time, he sent us back to our hometown, but once he really starts his work, we'll be busy too. Oh, I'll have to come up with an excuse for my wife again. Ha ha ha! You must have gotten scolded a lot by your wife. What did she say when you returned this time? She said, first, take care of your household chores and then do your job. And she poked me with her finger. Well, it's not like she's wrong. That's what I mean. If we end up following Jesus, I want to at least make a living and then leave. I wish we could catch a lot of fish at once. Then why don't you just keep casting your nets? Let's do that. Peter and Andrew began casting their nets again. Just then, a man approached from afar. When he reached the shore, he called out, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers for men." Teacher, Jesus has come. The two brothers brought their boat to shore, left their nets behind, and followed him. The three of them walked a bit further until they reached the place where Zebedee, James, and John were. He called James and John as well, and they left their father and the hired men to follow him. From that day on, Jesus began to preach seriously, as if this was the real start. He proclaimed the good news of the kingdom of heaven and healed many sick people and those possessed by demons. Even Peter's mother-in-law, who had a fever, was healed by him. As news spread that he was healing diseases and casting out demons, people from all over the neighborhood flocked to him, and he healed everyone who came. When demons were cast out, they seemed to know his identity and tried to say something, but he did not allow it. Perhaps it was something similar to what people heard in the synagogue at Capernaum. "What do we have to do with you, Jesus, you Nazarene? Have you come to destroy us? I know you who you are, the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." As these events became known throughout Galilee, more and more people came. The procession of people continued from early morning to late at night. Amidst this endless crowd, he continued to do what he had to do. Every early morning he would go to a secluded place to pray, and on this day he was seeking a quiet spot to have a deep conversation with God. At that time Simon and his companions found him and said, "Everyone is looking for you." Many people were with them. "Teacher, please do not leave us." People clung to him, not letting him go. Among them was the joy of healing, the wonder at demons being cast out, and the vitality and blessings his presence brought to Capernaum. They were afraid that if he left, all of this would disappear. As he looked upon them, a trace of sadness appeared in his eyes. "I must preach the good news of God's kingdom to the other cities also. For this reason, I have been sent." He turned to his disciples and said, "Let's go elsewhere into the next towns, that I may preach there also, because I came out for this reason." He left with his disciples, traveling throughout the synagogues of Galilee, preaching and casting out demons. More people than before heard the gospel and were healed through him. Wherever he went, miracles of healing diseases and pains continued endlessly. News about him spread beyond Galilee, reaching all of Judea, Samaria, Decapolis, and Syria. Following Jesus, the disciples became incredibly busy. Although he traveled to various places, he primarily based himself in Capernaum, so he spent a lot of time there. When he was at home, the disciples would sometimes work for their families, but managing both was never easy. James and John were fortunate because their father, Zebedee, was wealthy enough to have hired workers, so even if the two were absent, it didn't cause significant problems. But Peter and Andrew's situation was different. They had to work hard to support their families. Andrew was unmarried, so he had more freedom than Peter, but for Peter, juggling both responsibilities was becoming increasingly burdensome. He wondered if it would be better to focus on just one thing, but he couldn't give up either. If he had saved enough money, he could have followed Jesus without worrying about his livelihood, but since he hadn't saved much, there was no way out. So he stayed up all night fishing, doing his best, but nothing seemed to work. Seeing his struggles, not just his brother Andrew, but also James and John tried to help, yet the results were still lacking. Peter, washing his nets on the shore, said with a tired expression, "Andrew, isn't this too much?" "Yes, how can we not catch a single fish? It feels like my life has been messed up since I started following Jesus. Why isn't this working out?" What did Jesus do wrong? Fishing is about catching fish sometimes and not catching them other times. I'm saying this because even though I'm following Jesus, there's nothing I gain in my life. When will Jesus become king? When the time comes, he will. Just hang in there a little longer, Peter. Frustrated, Peter threw down the net he was washing. James and John exchanged wry looks as they watched him. Just then, they saw people walking along the beach, those who followed Jesus to hear his teachings. Those people are lucky. They don't have to worry about their livelihood and can listen to his teachings. Peter, enough. Jesus will hear you. James, like his brother John, was quick-tempered and signaled to Peter. But when Peter's heart was all tangled up, nothing could get him to let go. Jesus, who was preaching to the crowd, came to Peter and asked him to push the boat out a little from the shore. Then, he sat in the boat and taught the people. Watching this scene from behind, Peter's heart became even more complicated. Clearly, he liked Jesus, but he couldn't help wondering how long he could keep living like this. When would Jesus become king? When would he complete his mission? How long would I have to endure this life? Such questions filled Peter's mind. After a while, the sermon ended, and the people dispersed, returning to their homes. Only Jesus, Peter, Andrew, James, and John remained, floating on the peaceful Sea of Galilee at dawn. Jesus said to Peter, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." Peter replied, "Master, we worked all night and took nothing, but at your word I will let down the net." Even though his heart was troubled, what could he do? Jesus was someone he loved. It wasn't about whether Peter knew more about fishing than Jesus. The important thing was that Jesus' words were worth following. Peter knew this. The nets were cast according to his words. The outer edges of the nets began to sink first due to the weight of the stones. After some time, Peter jumped into the water to inspect the nets. Inside, he found an enormous catch of fish that they hadn't seen all night. Large fish caught in such quantity that the flaxen nets were almost torn. Peter and Andrew signaled to James and John, and they filled both their boats with fish. As they returned to the shore with boats so full they almost sank, they couldn't believe this miraculous reality. They were amazed and happy, thinking that following Jesus' words could lead to such events. Although they were tired, the smile of achieving the dream of a full catch didn't leave their faces. But Peter alone wore a somber expression. His serious expression showed that he was deep in thought. Jesus, who had been smiling with the others, noticed Peter's face and stood up from his seat. In the radiant morning sunlight, he stood firmly, his mission unshakable by any worldly wave, on the boat filled with earthly wealth. Peter fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, Lord." Peter was ashamed that, even after meeting Jesus, he still struggled with worldly worries, sometimes even blaming Jesus for his troubles. How could he call himself a disciple and follow Jesus? Peter thought that if Jesus abandoned him, he would have no words to say. But Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people alive." He never abandoned those he had chosen. Proving this, Jesus repeated what he had said before, and his face showed a smile softer than the calm waves of Galilee. Peter, Andrew, James, and John brought their boat to land, left everything, and followed him.